To talk about this manner in which we like to just run away from this tribe, and it makes people very uncomfortable, but also people say, you know, we do ideological politics. Tribe? Which tribe?
I think the last 1 week has once again produced the hypocrisy with which we attend to issues tribal. Because I think what the president did, possibly accidentally, because he was doing this for politics, he could have just opened a big discussion that the country has refused to have for all the years of independence. And I want to go back to the point that Yvonne was making and just take it further and say our ethnicity as a way of mobilizing in politics started way before independence itself. And during the Lancaster constitutional talks, you could see where the tribes were falling in. The major tribes like Kikuyu, Luo, Kamba, Embu, Meru were aligned to KANU. And then KADU, the Kenya African Democratic Union, came up as a party that was supported by those communities that feared the domination of big tribes. Among those were the Kalenjin, Somalis, Maasai, Luhya, which was then a small community. I don't understand how they got there, was also part of KADU. The truth is, that divide has never really left this country. It's still there. It determines our politics to date. And what we are seeing now, and occasionally in the course of our history, we see these big communities coming together once in a while, and the debate always takes the same shape it has taken. When the Kikuyu and Luo got together in the 60s, that was when we got the independence. And then they got together again in 2002, votes in the same basket, and that's how Mwai Kibaki became president. What we are seeing right now again, is it an attempt to put the two communities...
Also actually 2010 constitution as well.
Yeah, yes, as part of the momentum that began in 2002. But then on the sidelines, there'll be these communities that have genuine fears about domination. And why? Because if we were to be frank enough and face how power affects the communities, then we will notice that cabinet positions, civil service appointments, parastatal appointments, military, regional administration, government contracts, actually will show you where the president comes from. That is a fact. If we come to the big elephant in the room, and that is the relations between the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin, what is the reason behind the tension, the political tension? It's obvious. It's because of political power. The only two communities that actually dominated these things that actually can be described as resources. So in 2002, we all remember, 2003 actually, when Mwai Kibaki took over as president from Daniel Arap Moi, the exodus, the exit of Kalenjin civil servants was very, very high, starting from those in civil service. Some of them really very highly qualified to be in those positions. But they were replaced because that is the trend with our politics. So, Joe, the point I'm making here is the president might just have introduced a debate that the country must have and discuss whether this is how we should continue proceeding on the fear of others, because right now our elections are guided by fear of others. When you see people, and Francis, you can attest to this, in the last 2-3 elections, to mobilize central Kenya, you'll have to say it's a vote against Raila Odinga. And it works as a better mobilization tool than even suggesting it's a vote for the president. So we have this fear of others that the country needs to confront, that the country needs to actually discuss when it comes to the issue of managing ethnic relations. So the president might have stumbled on a topic that should be the next convention or national congress that the country should hold to discuss.
But the question I have is the manner in which he raised it, and are we going to see him now raise it in a more substantive manner? One, not so casually. Two, certainly not at a funeral, but lead the country towards a proper, sober, solid conversation around tribe and the dearth of ideology in this country, and meritocracy when it comes to our elections and how we elect, how we mobilize. And so for me, I think that is the concern. He raised an important issue, the manner in which he raised it. So now we're all just debating this on the sidelines, and people are taking it one way or another, weaponizing it one way or the other. But it is my hope that maybe he's got time between now and 2022 to actually make this country have a conversation like that, because coming from the office of the president, a person of that stature, I think was important. But whether or not this becomes a proper substantive conversation that we begin to have, honestly, is another matter. And so for me, it was just how he raised it, and whether he expected an honest
same line
conversation.
I highly doubt we will have a national conference at Bomas of Kenya or KICC to discuss tribe. I highly doubt we will do that. Just like we have, the way we had a conference for BBI at Bomas, I doubt we will have a conference to discuss ethnic arithmetic and who should take over. You see, the use of ethnicity as a mobilization tool for political purposes is purely a political process. And whatever the president said there was a very loaded political statement. And I look at it in two ways. Number one, it was a direct response to what have been the fears of the core NASA team previously, before the handshake, that it was like, Kikuyu Kalenjin, yangu kumi yako kumi. You speak to very many guys in NASA and they will tell you they were very uncomfortable with that statement, because they were asking, so Sisi, when will our time come? And that's why you could see a lot of cheering, especially from the crowd there. Number two, it was also a direct response to the dynasty versus hustlers narrative. That here is the president taking a dig at his deputy directly. Much as we've seen, the friction between the president and his deputy, it has never come out this openly. And the DP even responded to him directly. The following day. Right. And I mean, you could tell where the response was targeting. And the following day, you could see where the response was heading to. So this year, I anticipate a scenario where a lot of these things that were being said chini ya maji will now be said kuna juu ya maji. Yeah. So a lot of these statements will come out, and because we, previously we were saying the election is in 2 years, 3 years. Now, right from 2018 when the handshake came, we were told it's too early. The election is in 2 years, 3 years. Now the election is next year. So quite a number of these things will be said, and said very boldly. And as we move on, the dichotomy is now shifting clearly. Today you saw ODM leader Raila Odinga was in Ruaka, near my village in Banana. And you heard what he said, that he's now ready to, he's now ready and will climb the mountain. Metaphorically, looking at the Mount Kenya region.
By Matiba how to climb the mountain.
and that climbing the mountain is not just an idle statement. It is the realization that the Mount Kenya region has some substantial number of votes, and whoever wants to be president would have an idea or two about going that direction to get a chunk of it, or even the bulk of it, so to say. So you will see a lot of these things happening this year, some very blunt and direct statements will be made from both sides, and it should not come as a surprise. What we saw in Mululu, you can expect a continuation of such statements from both sides.
I want us to cross the borders a little bit and just, let's get some quick reflections about the Ugandan election that is going on before we end this show. And Linus, you have covered Ugandan elections many times, and I don't know what direction it seems to be going, because it is unthinkable, for example, in a country like ours, that the internet and all these communication systems will be shut down, whatever the reasons they had. But it sounds to me like a very odd thing to be happening, but also just some very ugly scenes that we have seen there in that country over the last couple of days. This is something that ought to be a big conversation in the region, because I mean the president over there has been giving some statements about why this is happening, and kind of justifying why the actions have been taken against Bobi Wine, for example, the opposition candidate. What do you make of all of these things as someone who has observed this for across many elections?
I think it's quite and should be quite a concern that Uganda has conducted its elections the same way every time. The result is predictable. You don't really need to stay late in the night. I don't know what you'll be waiting for in terms of results. It will end the same way. And then it plays out exactly the same way, because look at the campaigns. The campaigns were lopsided in favor of the president because of the intimidation, the harassment, the beatings that presidential candidates, including Bobi Wine, went through. I think we were sitting on this set one time when they were presenting nomination papers, and one of the presidential candidates arrived there without shoes. Without shoes. That tells you the gap. You can't possibly have someone arriving presenting nomination papers without shoes, and then sit on Saturday waiting for results that the person without shoes could win.
And not that he forgot to wear his shoes, eh?
No.
He lost them on the way.
Yes. And the sad thing about the Ugandan situation is Uganda has not had a single peaceful transfer of power from one sitting president to another.
Yep.
We all know very well President Obote started and was overthrown in 1971 by Idi Amin. Idi Amin was chased by Tanzanians in 1978. Yusuf Lule served for 68 days, 2 months. And then he was also removed. Godfrey Binaisa served for a year, and then he was removed by the military commission. The military commission was headed by Paul Muwanga, and who was the vice chairman of the military commission? Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. And that is the commission that actually organized the election of 1980, December, and which Museveni lost at the constituency level. And then it was believed to have been won by Semogerere, the Democratic Party leader. And that is the reason he went to the bush, and you will hear him talking about those elections. But have elections been conducted in Uganda better than they were in 1980? I think a lot of strides have been made in Uganda. Uganda is a stable, peaceful country, and the economy is growing. But when it comes to elections, they have a lot of fears about it, about the outcome. The outcome is predetermined largely because NRM is very powerful. It controls the military, it controls the judiciary, controls the civil service, controls the police. And one more thing that can be said is, look at those ugly scenes. For those who were too young at the time the continent had the apartheid police in South Africa, just look at the conduct of the Ugandan police and security services. The savagery, the brutality, tear gas, the breaking of windows of cars and all that. That is what the apartheid police used to do. And so it's not a very good image for Uganda.
For me, I think what strikes me about what's happening there is, the generational it's in a sense a generational election. You have 76-year-old Museveni, who's been in power 35 years. He's been in power almost as long as Bobi Wine has been alive. Bobi Wine is 38, and this man took over in 1986. He's now seeking to make it 40 years at the helm of Uganda. And interesting, in a country that is said to have the second lowest median age in the world, only second to Niger. The median age in Uganda is 15 years. With 75% or more of the population under the age of 30. And so for whatever happens with this election, and for most people, I would refer them to Francis Gashu's Facebook post on the same. He said just 2 words, go look for it, and see what happened. Something is starting to happen with Bobi Wine's candidature. Of course, there are other young ones. There's one even younger than him, you know, Katumba. But, you know, there's word about, you know, why he was actually in the race, including a young woman who's actually, you know, a former journalist as well. But for me, it's that this is the start of something, and possibly maybe change that is inevitable in the country. Even though, you know, President Yoweri Museveni has, I think, you know, promoted his son time and time again in the military, and maybe many saying that this is what's going to happen next. But whatever happens, there will be a big change. I mean, you know, there's 18.1 million voters who are registered, many of them young, many of them voting for the very first time. And so everything we have seen running up to the election is something that many of the young people might start to get, you know, the courage to start to speak out, to start to change. And many of those narratives that, you know, President Museveni has been, you know, putting in, that, you know, Bobi Wine and by extension his lawyer Nick Opio of Chapter 4, you know, are getting money from outside, always trying to introduce the idea of gay rights. And for many Ugandans who are saying, that's not an issue. We don't have human rights to begin with. All we want is water, you know, access to electricity, education, and that sort of thing. For whatever happens, and I guess it's not too hard to see which way this is going to go. I think, you know, there's a generation of change that's been started by Bobi Wine's candidature.
Put it this way, Joe. Museveni decides.
I was trying to be diplomatic about your Facebook post.
Plain and simple. I mean, were we anticipating
whether it was Uganda decides or, you know,
yes,
or Uganda decided,
largely
or
decided, yes,
or decided,
or
yeah,
decided.
yes.
Why do I say so? Look, how do you hold an election and that day you shut down the internet, you shut down all the social media platforms, and there's a reason why they were shut down, because Bobi Wine in his mobilization process was saying,
online,
protect your vote.
Yes.
How do you do that? When you vote, take a photo.
Picture.
When the results are announced, take a photo of the, you know, declaration form, more or less like what we saw in the Kenyan election the other day. So that also the Bobi Wine team would have what they would call an independent tallying center to contrast what the Electoral Commission in Uganda and what their, you know, their agents would be having. And then the brutality, look at what happened to the observers, you know, a decision on who becomes an observer, who doesn't become an observer. So you can see, I mean, it's open, it's clear where the direction will be. But also, not a surprise. Remember what happened to Kizza Besigye all along? Yeah. Similarly happening to Bobi Wine. But this is a message that the continent is growing, so to say. I mean, there are more and more younger people in the country and in Africa, even in Kenya, who will be participating. For example, in next year's election, you'll have about 2-3 million people who have never voted, who turned 18 between 2018, so to say, and 2022. About 3 million or thereabout. People who have never voted, people who you will not tell very many stories historically. They are driven by what they see, what they perceive, what they understand. And 3 million voters are not a small size. And so a lot of these discussions in our political setup here in Kenya, in Uganda, and in the continent will continue. Maybe as we move on, future elections will be determined by very many other factors other than ethnicity, hustlers versus dynasties, rotational presidents, and so on and so forth. There are people who have no understanding about some historical things that we are talking about, who are not driven so much by what happened back in the years. They will be driven by what they see, what they feel, what they understand, and maybe the person they think will drive them.
Candidate in Uganda.
Yeah, is there?
Bobby Wine.
Okay,
Bobi Wine is
He's from the
ghetto president.
He's a ghetto guy.
Yeah, that probably deserves another show. But I think it just raises the whole question of elections, whether they are indeed, whether regular elections are a sign of democracy or not. It's a big conversation that's happening, especially in Africa now. But we need to end this show, and as always, we do that with our final words. And tonight we'll begin with Yvonne Stake.